since the mid 1980s. And I just saw something in a magazine one time. It was some kind of Amish quilt. And just it appealed to me as something I wanted to try. I've always sewn all my life. And I made this quilt from this magazine. And it was nothing more than sewing blocks of fabric onto a mattress pad. And the mattress pad even had the elastic loops on the corner so you could attach it to the bed. And I finished that, and it was pretty awful, but I was very proud of it. And it got me hooked right away. What the doing something with shapes and colors and arrangements, what happens with that? And that's how I started. I mostly follow patterns, but I go completely off the rails with color. That's my forte, and I love to just play with colors. I do some make my own patterns, but just not very much. It just kind of takes my brain to a place where it doesn't like to go. So I'm not real good at the math part of it or the just the figuring. Just let me play with color. I used to hand quilt. My hands won't do that anymore, so now I'm machine quilting a lot. And I recently bought a long arm, which I'm really enjoying. Um, I love to pick out the pattern and the colors. I like piecing them all together. I'm not a big fan of cutting them out. All the prep work is not a whole lot of fun, but the actual color choices and construction. And I love to pick out the quilting designs that I'm going to do on top of the quilt, with the machine. I love doing that. It's different for every quilt and every method that you decide to use, of course. You just find a pattern that just speaks to you. And I find that I will go through a color phase where all of my quilts during a certain time will be greens and blues, or they'll be reds and golds and blacks. And so it's interesting to watch the progression of that, but choose a pattern, and then I'll go in my closet and just find colors, fabrics that I want to use and pull them out, and I audition them. I pile them up. I leave them stacked for days, and I'll walk in here and look at them and pull things out and add things, and then eventually start cutting and then piecing and putting it together up on my design wall so I can see it. And there again, I leave it for days up on the design wall, and I'll come in a different door and I look at it and think, oh, I don't think I like that. Take that down. Or, wow, that's really stunning. I'll never replicate that. And you layer it and quilt it and bind it and find a home for it. Most quilts, I have too many at home now. I'd like to start donating some of them, which I do, and I'll sell some and give some to friends. But it's a process. It's not a quick thing. It is for some people, but not for me. I don't work in a hurry. Some of the favorite ones are the ones that I think they're my favorites after they've found a purpose. I have a quilt I'd like to show you that I made, and then my mother discovered she had to undergo cancer treatment, so I sent it to her to have over her lap while she sat through chemo, and I have that quilt back now, and it's one of my favorites. And the other ones that just made me happy to make because they're bright and they're cheerful, and somebody walked in the room and just went, oh, I love that. And and then I think, yeah, I know where that's going. That's I don't know if I have any very specific ones. I have some that are technically very good, and they're just very good, but they don't have a life. They don't have a personality, and they need that. Usually the quilts just evolve, and people have asked me to make quilts for them, and whatever you make is fine, and I do good with that. Or I just have them come over and they can pick out a quilt from what I've got. But when somebody says, well, I want one that's this size and it has to have blue in it and I need greens on the borders, I completely freeze up. I can't have those barriers set up for me. I don't know what it is, but I just freeze. So I'd rather just let them evolve, and they'll tell me where they go. And I have that happen where I'm working on a quilt and I'm thinking of somebody at that time, and it's like, okay, this is telling me something for a reason. They do speak to you. Right now, and there again, that's a phase thing, like the colors. Right now, I'm into lap size quilts, and I like to do wall hangings. And then I went into a bigger quilt era, and right now I'm in the lap quilt. And they're quick and easy, and they're easier to find homes for because people always have room for just to throw a quilt over the sofa or something to carry in your car. Basic, everybody has a sewing machine. A lot of quilters have 2 or 3 or more, and it's always set up and ready to go. My dad put up a pegboard for me for all my rulers, and I think at one point I counted something like 22 acrylic rulers, and I use probably 4 of them because gadgets are everything. So there's rulers for different just different projects and different techniques that you're going to use, whether you're going to do triangular things or wedge things or square things. There's just lots of tools, and you have lots of rotary cutters. The blades are very sharp and very expensive. I have a lot of stencils to plan out quilt designs, and a lot of the stencils I brought home from my mom's. And irons, you have irons, and I have a little mini iron and a little workstation set up here so I don't have to get up to press things. I can sew and then turn around and press so I don't have to get up. There's markers, there's tons of markers and threads and patterns, but this is pretty basic. But it's so funny you ask that because when I go to a retreat, and when I did do that, and you pack up the stuff that you need at the retreat, and I find out how much in my room I actually do not use because I always go back to the 1 rotary cutter, the 2 rulers, the 4 colors of thread that I use, the 1 machine, and yeah, that's really all I need. But no, you might find the next gadget you can't live without. The long arm machine is in the basement. It's in a nutshell, it's a very long extension, what would I call that? It's like a big table with a movable sewing machine on it, and you motor it back and forth to do the quilting. Mm-hmm. And that allows me to do king or queen size quilts or smaller, and you just lay it out, and you can just move this machine and get it done in relatively quick time. I have one quilt that took me like 9 months to hand quilt, and the machine quilting I can do in just a matter of days. It's amazing. And that actually is one of my favorites. Now that you say that, because see, I forget about quilts. And that one I made at a retreat with a bunch of dear friends, and I had cut it all out and laid it out, and I was doing this new method of whack and stash or something, I don't know. I had totally screwed it up, and this woman there named Pam, she looked at it and she said, Maud, I think you need to stop and we need to back up and get you back on track with this quilt. I had it just totally goofed up. So everybody, about 4 people, stopped what they were doing, and we all came over and rearranged all the blocks. I had to take some of them apart, and it's like they settled me down and got that all laid out, and then I could put it together. And the colors that came out in that one are just wow. I mean, that one really worked, but that was a group effort. So it's a community. Quilting is a community. It's just a happy place to be. Quilters are the happiest, friendliest, most giving people I've ever run into. Yeah. That is another challenge for my art group. And we felted silk fibers, silk roving. And then we challenged ourselves. We had to do something with it. So I brought my piece home, and then I had this African panel where this lady was in, and I really didn't care for it much. So I cut her out and cut out a hole in the silk roving and put her in that. And then it just kind of made itself. I added the red fabric and the sides here, and I put the border on, and this was left over from another fabric. But I would come in, I was auditioning things, and I would come in the room, and she would tell me what she liked or didn't like about this piece. And there's a little theater mask, a ceramic button right there of a guy kind of peeking out behind the silk. And it looks like a stage to me. So this one is called Curtain Call. And I love her. I just love her. And that was one of the few that I've ever done just totally without a pattern. It just kind of evolved. That's another one that was made and then, well, let's see, let me start. I started it at a retreat, and it's a fractured pattern. There are 4 of the flower panels that you layer and you cut and slice and resew and cut and slice and resew. And it's called BFF, for Best Friend Forever. While I was making it, a dear old friend of mine passed away. And there's some crystals that are in the center of the flower that kind of drift off to the side because this friend she was like a little whirlwind that came in the room, and when she left, you were kind of like, whoa, my goodness, what just hit me? And that's what those crystals represent. And I miss her a lot. So that one's for Ellen. Yeah, that was a challenge. I'll never do that pattern again. It was also started at a retreat, and it was put away for a long time, and then I brought it out and finished it during the elections of 2016 when it was very chaotic. And to me, that little figure down in the bottom looks like it's running from stuff falling, and so I call it Raining Chaos. And it can be raining as in R-A-I-N or R-E-I-G-N. Yeah. So that one again was totally freeform, but it evolved over a long time. It was in my closet for a long time till the elections. Yeah. This was a peaceful little piece with some warm colors, and then this was a challenge for my art group. It was a photo I'd taken of a tree down in the woods, and then we had to represent that in fabric in kind of a wild way, and the high contrast is what makes this piece interesting. So just playing with colors and shapes. Yeah. Another challenge for my art group, this is, we took a block that we had to alter in some way. So the block that in the center, this little block here, I shrunk and then attached it to the background that I created, and it was supposed to represent the pandemic because our world has shrunk and it's very confined now. So, and this was actually a kit, which I rarely buy. Everything is put together for you. And I bought the kit. I love the pattern, but I didn't like the background fabric, so I changed that. And let's see here. I think this is the top. And then this is one of the first quilts that I quilted on my long arm, but I just like the pastels against the black background. And one other wall hanging here this is also one of my favorites. This was so out of my comfort zone. The colors, it's very pastel, and very light colored, and that is not my style. But this worked. Just to get out of my comfort zone and try something different was good for me. And this was a class I took. This is made up of leftover blocks. There again, out of my comfort zone. But I thought it kind of looked like an old window. I am a stripe fanatic. I discovered stripes. There's this fabric designer's name is Kay Fawcett, and I found his stripes, and I made quilt after quilt after quilt out of stripes. But this one really just was so much fun to make. So much fun.